Welcome to Falcons Drip, your go-to source for Falcons news and draft coverage. I'm Thon, founder and voice of Falcons Drip.
Welcome back, everybody. Today, we've got the questions from you guys, and we're going to answer them. I'm joined by my co-host, Kyle, as always. Before we jump into those, Kyle, why don't you kind of fill us in about what's going on with our cornerback room?
Recently, within a couple days of recording this episode, Falcons released Casey Hayward. Casey Hayward, as y'all know, was the second corner for the Falcons last year before getting injured and them having to eventually end up on Cornell Armstrong because of all the injuries. He was released with an injury designation, failed physical. So he will save the team $5 million. So that means after like the money that has to be spent on signing the draft class, as of now, Falcons have $10 million in cap.
Yeah, I think it's slightly under 10, right? Like 9.8 or something.
Yeah, maybe slightly under.
Not to get too technical with it. And I know a lot of people are sitting there like, oh, see, I told you. I don't think if he wasn't injured, I don't think they would have cut him. That's just me personally. I think he was hurt, and they brought guys in. They probably liked what they saw from the cornerbacks that they have now, and they said, okay, well, we don't know if you're going to necessarily play that much. And I think it was, again, I don't know, but if I were to guess, it was probably maybe mutual. And Casey Hayward wanted to go to a place where he would play more, and it also saves Atlanta $5 million. And obviously they felt like between the injury and the guys we brought in that we would be fine without him. But I truly don't think this was in like the plan. Like I think they were going to have Casey Hayward compete for the number 2 spot.
So. I think it points to the Falcons not thinking he was healing in the right way, and then being like, this probably isn't going to work. It's an aging corner who, as people get older, they tend to get injured more easily. So they're probably planning for maybe an injury and thinking, hey, since he's been injured recently and he doesn't seem like he might be fully ready to go going into the season, let's just release him, maybe fill it with a young guy somewhere in the draft.
That's a good point. Like I didn't think about that, but when you think about it, like let's say Casey Hayward does get ready and then he goes all of camp and then he gets just hurt again. Now you've taken all of those reps away from our younger guys.
And also he's an aging cornerback, and cornerback, they're running backwards full speed, having to keep up with receivers. So you got to be fast, very healthy. You can't play corner at like 50%. And with injured legs, maybe an injured arm because you got a hand fight. There's a lot of technical stuff to corner, so it's hard to play if you're not in peak physical shape. So I think this is a great move for the Falcons. I know it's kind of iffy. I was kind of iffy about it when it first came out, but for me, it's the right move to make if you don't think he can stay healthy.
And it just hurts because he was playing so well until he got hurt last year, and it was we had talked about it. I don't know if you and I had talked about it, but I had talked about it as Hayward and AJ being one of the better tandems in the NFL last year, and it just feels like injuries robbed us of that because AJ got hurt earlier on, and then Casey got hurt shortly after AJ came back, or right before AJ came back. I think right before, because I think we had a game where it was like Armstrong, Darren Hall, D. Alford starting for us. So.
But for me, I'm not too worried about this because getting Okudah, who's like 24 years old, and you got AJ Terrell beside him, that's a good tandem. And if you can get him schemed better than Detroit had him and maybe get his peak potential out of him, you're having the same production, if not better production, from this cornerback room. And I don't think there's much more you can ask for from this cornerback room. The only thing that can slow him down is if the D-line can't get to the passer, in my opinion. If the D-line struggles, it's going to affect the quarterback room because they're going to have to guard for too long, and it's going to just become a bad day for the Falcons defense.
This is one last thing I'll say quick. I don't think this has any impact on us taking a corner or not taking a corner. I truly believe that this whole time, Terry was sitting there saying, we're going best player available no matter what. And he brought guys in to the cornerback room to solidify that. So if we didn't go corner, it wasn't a problem. He brought in Bud Dupree. So if we don't go edge, it's not a problem. I think we'll be totally fine no matter what. We're pretty solid throughout our roster at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've talked a little bit about hopefully upgrading the left guard spot, but I think the team is very comfortable with two things: either the guys we have on the roster now and Ledford coaching them up, or there's plenty of options out there in free agency still that we can pick somebody up, hopefully for cheap for a 1 year plug and play. So,
And you look at this move, it gives them the cap to do that, the flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like before, you would have been like, okay, we're kind of constraints. We can't get a quality left guard with the cap we have. Maybe we can get maybe a guy, but it's not going to be a starter quality guy. But maybe you can get a fringe starter now, or someone who started some games and shown some promise, a young guy maybe for the Falcons. But beforehand, you were going to get a backup who maybe was drafted high and maybe has some tools.
The only thing I'll say is, like, I don't think we needed $5 million for that, because I think, I mean, we signed Wilkerson last year for what, less than 2, I believe.
Mm-hmm. But he was more of a backup who had some tools and they liked what he had. But I'm saying maybe you could get a guy who started some games and had some experience, more experience than he had. But overall, I think they can get a quality guy either way, even if they didn't cut him. I think it just makes the likelihood that you get a quality guy better.
So just kind of pulling it up now and just looking at some of the offensive linemen who are available. Donovan Smith, and again, I know Smith, some of these guys are tackles, but could possibly get bumped to guard. You got Donovan Smith. Isaiah Wynn is like my dream signing. Cameron Fleming. Dalton Reisner is still out there. Taylor Luan said, I think he said he would play guard under the right circumstances, and he did say he would play for Atlanta. Brandon Snell, George Font, Michael Schofield, Gabe Jackson. There's plenty of options out there for a cheap or a 1 year prove it deal. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see what happens. Roger Saffold's out there too, who's kind of on the decline, but maybe if he could come into he knows the system. So maybe if he could come in just for a year, he might be able to provide some quality stuff for us.
I really like the Isaiah Wynn you brought up. I think, I don't know if that'd be out of the price range. If they're trying to add more guys and won't have enough money to make their other signings. But if they could do that, that'd be a dream for the Falcons. He's a versatile player. He's played tackle. Obviously, he played guard at Georgia. Then they decided it's time to bump out in the NFL. So he's a great player who's had tons of versatility and can play just about every O-line position except for center.
Yeah, and I know, I know we're sitting here saying it might not be in the cards, but if you look at it, I mean, there's still a decent amount of money out there, but there's not so much money out there. The Bears have like 30 million in cap space, but so maybe that'd be a spot that he would go. But we'll have to see. All right. Without further ado, let's jump into some of these questions that you guys have.
So we'll go into Drew's question first.
Hey guys, just want to say I love the show and just keep up the good work. I was curious on what you thought about Jalen Carter if he were to fall to 8. Do you think that's a player that we would take, despite all of the off-field stuff that's going on with him, just all of that, like the drama with him? Do you think that's something that we would still, consider taking, like over like a Nolan Smith or like a Christian Gonzalez or just one of those players?
And he asked about Jalen Carter. He was talking about the chance of him falling down to 8. So I want to get your thoughts. Would that be a better pick than like a Nolan Smith at 8? Or would you stick on the Nolan Smith train and say, we're going Nolan Smith 100%?
So it's so tough. That's such a tough call because Jalen Carter, everyone talks about how he's the best player in this draft and would have been going definitely in the top 3 if it wasn't for the off the field stuff. And unfortunately, we're not privy to the meetings. So if Atlanta and I guess that's what it all depends on, right? Like if you think you meet with him and you think, oh, he's a good kid, he's made some mistakes, or he's got a little bit of attitude, but we can definitely turn it around. I think he's the perfect role player / replacement for some of our older aging defensive tackles. Calais Campbell's only got 1 year left. Anyamata's over 30. Grady Jarrett's over 30. So I would love to add him, but Nolan Smith's character is something that isn't such an asset that isn't talked about enough. So it just kind of depends on what you think of Jalen Carter and what you think you and your locker room and team can get out of him, if that makes sense. So I don't think he's off the board by any means. Like if he's there at 8, it's definitely a serious discussion.
I take Nolan Smith in my opinion, just based off character wise. I think he's the safe pick, and with Falcons right now, you're trying to compete now. And if that goes wrong, it looks bad on the franchise. I think Nolan Smith is a safe pick. He's gotten comparisons to people like Hassan Reddick. So if he can just be that as an 8th overall pick, even if Nolan Smith is a better talent and ends up being better, I feel like it's better for the
Jalen Carter,
organization because it's not a locker room guy who might be a cancer in some ways, and the ways he's helped lead to a crash and 2 deaths of his teammates, even though he was speeding beside him and he was involved somehow way in the crash. That looks bad on him. And then you have the speeding ticket from earlier. You also have the fight he invoked at Missouri, the overweight at the combine. It hasn't been a one-time occurrence.
The pro day, it was the pro day he was overweight.
I feel like I can't get past it. I can't say, oh, this is a one-time thing, he'll get over it. But if you're looking at the Falcons, they got experienced D tackles who could lead by example, and maybe that could help. So it's possible. But for me, the concerns are there. And with how much he's constantly done it, and feel like it keeps happening over and over and the cycle keeps repeating. And I don't know if it's the right to take a chance on him if he's there.
But I think
that's up to the front office.
Yeah, and I
how
think
their meetings go.
If they did, like, I feel like you'd be like, all right, well, here we go, giddy up. Like I don't think anyone would be mad and if anyone is mad, like truly mad that the Falcons took Jalen Carter, figure it out, because you're not a part of the team meetings with him. You're not a part of doing the research and talking with people about him. You're not a part of meeting with guys in the locker room, sitting down with Grady Jarrett and Calais Campbell and saying, hey, we got this guy. We're looking at this guy. Do you think you can help him? Right. We're not a part of those conversations, so we don't really know. And if they think it's worth the risk, this front office and this coaching staff has done enough, in my opinion, to earn the right of benefit of the doubt for everyone except for Will Levis.
100%. I give the coaches and the staff the benefit of the doubt. If they do take him, I'm gonna trust that something went right in their meetings and they saw something. They were like, okay, this guy's the right fit, even though he has his character flaws and they've shown up over and over this offseason.
And I actually don't think he makes it past the Lions.
Yeah, I don't think he makes it to the Falcons because I think some team's going to take the risk and be like, okay, we're going to bet on his talent and say, okay, these are just some mistakes in his past. He'll get past this, he'll mature. But it's really tough to see a guy who went from, oh, he's going to be the first overall pick to, oh, is he even going to go top 5 due to this?
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Hey, so this is Calder here that had a question about the Falcons. So my question is, we know that the Falcons have a top 5 rushing attack in last season, and they'll probably still have it this upcoming season, hopefully. I want to know what y'all think Arthur Smith needs to do, or how will he develop these big key players, Kyle Pitts, Johnny Smith, Drake London, how will he utilize the passing attack? You know, and so is it just going to be a bunch of play actions and stuff? Like, you know, do you think Desmond Ridder will successfully make the passes to the wide receivers and tight ends? And, you know, I'm really looking forward to this season and look forward to the podcast. Peace out.
So that was a lot to take in. And I think just thinking about the overall offense next year, I think what people don't realize is how much Kyle Pitts does for our team, even if he's not getting the ball. Like when you watch the defense, everybody's eyes are on 8. Everyone is looking to see, okay, where's Kyle Pitts? Where is he lined up? And I think having him in the offense this year with Ridder, I think will be so much better for him as well. I mean, Kyle Pitts had the most air yards, I think, of anyone in the NFL last year. Or at least he did at one point. I don't know what it ended up being, but he also had the most uncatchable yards in the NFL last year, and that was only playing for 10 games. So I do expect the play action to set up our guys. I think that I know we talk about like having a deep threat, and I think that Kyle Pitts is also part of the deep threat, and he really takes the top off the defense. All the defense is always concerned about him, and I think that'll allow Drake London to eat even more. We'll have more dump offs to Jonnu Smith, and I think this offense is going to be a well-oiled machine by the time the season rolls around.
I think a lot of times they're going to either start off the game with like a run or some sort of play action to get it started to keep the defense on their toes. I think it's going to be more passing this year. I think it's going to be a lot of QB rollouts where he rolls out, maybe finds the tight end as a safety option where no one's open. He dumps it down to the tight end or the running back. But I think they will use Kyle Pitts on some deep shots, whether it be in play action or just a streak down the field. I think he's going to go down the seam a lot more than you've seen because I feel like Desmond Ridder has a better arm. They're going to utilize him more, Desmond Ridder, on quarterback runs. They're definitely going to get his legs involved. They're going to throw it deep more, but it's definitely going to be more run than pass. It's going to be them running to set up the pass instead of where it was passing to set up the run in the Matt Ryan era.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think also we'll see when we're down big, I don't think we'll just run the ball like we did against Tampa Bay, where we almost did come back anyways because our defense was playing stellar. But I think we'll have the ability to pass the ball, and we will. It won't be down 3 touchdowns with, a quarter and a half or less left, and we're still pounding the rock, even though that did work. It really did work, but I don't think we'll see that because we don't have to do that because Ridder, Pitts will unlock a whole nother level of this offense. Plus the additions, like I said, of Jonnu Smith, Scotty Miller, like those guys are going to open more things up for us, more dump down passes to Jonnu, who's going to work his way to getting first downs. And also too, I think that Kyle Pitts will always be the number one guy. Like I think as good as London is, because of Pitt's speed and because of his mismatch ability, and just because of his overall just reach. I mean, he's got freakish arms and freakish length and freakish speed that I think he'll always be the number one guy, even if he's not getting the most targets. So I think he'll be the number one read. And I think also too, defense will be keying on him more, which will in turn make Drake London much more available versus the end of last year. He was unable to do that at times because he was the guy that they were locked onto.
I totally agree with what you just said. You were talking about how Drake London is like the second guy to Kyle Pitts, and I totally agree with that. It's kind of like a Julio Jones and Roddy White type situation where Julio would be such a mismatch that defenses would have to double him, and it'd open up guys like Roddy White to be this great receiver as the second guy. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen, maybe on a lesser scale, because this is a more run-oriented team. So say one of the receivers has 1,000 yards, maybe the other has 800 or 900. And it's going to be less passing yards than maybe some expect, because it's definitely a more balanced offense and definitely not as much let's
I
ram it down your throat.
And I really wouldn't be surprised though to see both guys have 1,000 yards. But Kyle Pitts might have games where he has 10 targets, and he might have games where he has 5 targets and they're all deep threat, deep bombs. He's 5 targets for, 4 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown, right? Something like that, because he'll be the number one guy. But by doing that, he's going to open up Drake London so much. So Drake London might be ending games with like 10 catches for, maybe the same amount of yards. Maybe it's 4 catches for 90 yards for Kyle and 10 catches for 90 yards for Drake, just because Drake's going to be open and doing more of the intermediate and short routes and those kinds of things where, like I said, I think that the eyes will be on Kyle. So
I'm definitely more excited for this offense than I was for like a Matt Ryan type offense when they had Julio, Sanu, and stuff. This is because they are more balanced. If they're in a tough running down and they need 1 yard, I know they're able to run and get it instead of getting stuffed and having this horrible O-line. The O-line is exciting. Every part of the offense is solid. There's no weakness on this offense where I'm like, oh, this is horrible. We need to improve this part. There's parts where I'm like, I wish it was better, but I can't say I hate any parts of this offense.
And we've talked about the left guard a lot, but the combination of Dwayne Ledford plus our scheme makes it easier to be a guard in this offense, right?
For sure.
So just imagine though going out and going no huddle, and we go out there with you've got Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, Drake London, Cordero Patterson, and Keith Smith or somebody along those lines. It really could be anybody because you have no clue if we're going to run or pass the ball at that point.
100%. And I love all these guys we have. We got 4 running backs deep. At wide receiver, we're less deep than we used to be. We don't have one of the best cores at receiver, but when you have one of the best tight end rooms in your top 2, you don't have to have a crazy receiving room because the tight ends will open up stuff for the wide receiver room.
And I know this is a little off topic, but do not be shocked when we take a tight end, like draft one. This is a great tight end draft and not a great wide receiver draft. And I really wouldn't be shocked to see we have lineups where we go out with 4 tight ends and a running back. Like that would not shock me whatsoever.
It wouldn't shock me because this is a run heavy team and it'd work perfectly. Maybe you put 4 tight ends, a running back, a quarterback, and all your offensive linemen, and maybe just 1 wide receiver out there, 1 big wide receiver like that would be Collins.
Well, I feel like that's what you could use. That's what you could use Kyle Pitts for. Like you line up you go 4 tight ends, but you could put Kyle Pitts on one side as like 1 receiver and Jonnu Smith as basically the other. And then it's really like a 21 personnel. So 21 is 2 tight ends and 1 running back.
For sure. You definitely could do that. They're versatile enough to do that. And you also have like a Felipe Franks, who's a developmental guy who could come in there and try to act like go out and maybe get a screen or something. He's a guy who's got the physicality, got the speed. He's just working on blocking. He's working on getting his hands right.
The nuances of tight end.
He's shown pieces of what he could be.
It'll be really interesting to see if he makes the team because I feel like in the last 2 years, we've had such because we've had so much money spent in dead cap that we really haven't had the roster to really bring guys on like we have this year. And so we've had the luxury of being able to bring on a guy like Felipe Franks and kind of see what happens over the last 2 years. But I feel like this year,
this is a make or break season for him.
Yeah, I think this will be a make or break preseason for sure. Because I think that if he can't like figure it out, I don't think he makes the team anymore because I think our roster is that much better than.
With that, we'll go to the next question. And the next question is from King Art. So we'll play that audio now.
King Art is here. I got a 2-part question or 2 questions. Who was your favorite free agency pickup and why? And how do you feel about Desmond Ridder going into the draft?
Question. We'll start with the free agent part of it. And I feel like Jesse Bates is the low-hanging fruit, because although I'm so excited about Jesse Bates and what he really does for our defense and helping our corners and he just helps everywhere. He's almost like an eraser back there and limits what teams can do. And we haven't had somebody like that that I can really think of. I mean, a lot of people talk about Thomas Decoud. He had like 1 year where he was like that, but really, this is different, next level stuff. So I would say, so I'm not going to talk about him because, like I said, low hanging fruit, but I'm going to say Calais Campbell is my most excited free agent that I'm about a signing. And not, I love what Calais Campbell does as a player, but it's more of what that means to our team, right? Like Calais Campbell just came out recently and said how Aaron Rodgers was texting him saying, "Hey, join the Jets." And he chose the Atlanta Falcons over the Jets. He said he wants to go to a contender. The other teams he was looking at were the Bills, the Jets, the Dolphins. I mean, those are 3 competing teams in the AFC. 3 teams with, well, if the Jets get their quarterback, with their quarterback solidified, their offense is solidified. And he said he sat down and he watched tape of Desmond Ridder and said, okay, like, I see where this team is going. And he also mentioned too in one of his interviews that free agents around the league are talking about what Atlanta's doing. Free agents are seeing what's happening in Atlanta. And for him, it was I don't have a lot of time left. So are they going to do it in a couple of years, or are they going to do it this year? And he decided on his own that this is the year that Atlanta turns it around. So like for me, him coming here was the most exciting thing, because it just shows the belief that he has in us, and he's ready to, give everything he's got. And he also too solidifies our defensive line. He's a guy with inside outside versatility who can really collapse the pocket and mentor the rest of our team. So for me, that was the most exciting pickup. But you can't really go wrong with any of these guys.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There's not much you can go wrong with in this class. All the guys seem to be good pickups, with the Bud Duprees, all of those guys, even the underrated guys like the Matt Collins, the Scotty Millers, whoever you want to say. Those were great pickups for the value they provided. But I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball here to y'all, and I'm going to go with Caden Ellis. Here's why. His potential, if you get him in the right scheme, is to be a 8-sack plus guy. He showed with the Saints he had 7 sacks in 11 games when he was in the right fit and at the position he needed to, versus the other 3 years where he only had 1 sack total. So this is more of a boom or bust guy, and if Falcons scheme him right, he could shine with Atlanta, and this is why I love this pickup so much.
And that's part of why he came to Atlanta, right? Because he wanted to go someplace where they were going to be able to utilize his full potential, and he knew that Nielsen could. I also think too, just the 2 guys that we mentioned, talking about Ellis and talking about Calais Campbell, like those are 2 guys. Those are 2 guys that are very versatile. And we've talked about, our defense has talked about, Nielsen and Arthur Smith have talked about wanting a versatile defense. Like those are guys who can play inside, they can play outside, they can rush the passer, they can stop the run. They can just do so many different things and do so many different things well, that you could have Calais Campbell out there and you don't know if he's going to line up at end, or if he's going to line up as a defensive tackle in the 3-4, or if he could line up head up the nose. Same thing with Ellis. He played outside linebacker. He played defensive end. He played inside linebacker. So it will be very versatile with these guys. And I think there's just 2 awesome, major, huge, throw all the good words in there. That's just great signing for us. So
I 100% agree with versatility being a big thing, because if you look at every team, there's going to be some sort of injury at some position, whether it be corner, whether it be linebacker, and you got to get through that, whether it be by switching a guy from outside linebacker to inside linebacker. So if you have those guys who can move around and make it easier to fill in for a guy who gets injured, that's a great ability.
Absolutely. And I don't even mean total, I don't even mean just for injuries. Like if you have guys that you can literally mid play. I mean, let's say you're sitting there and this is a high level stuff. So I don't know if it's something we could do right away. But if you're sitting there and you're in like a 3-4 front, but you've got these versatile guys and the offense changes the play and they move their pieces around, you potentially could, bump Calais Campbell from a defensive end inside and walk Caden Ellis down on that side. And now all of a sudden, instead of a 4-3, we're rocking a 3-4. So, it's just a lot of different things we can do. So I think those are just some great pickups. And that being said, with the whole Jesse Bates thing, Jesse Bates can also make it easier for those things to happen because you got him back there covering the
100%.
back
I
end.
totally agree. You definitely need those versatile guys so you can run multiple schemes and be able to be versatile if you need to change something, if something's not working. And sometimes these coaches midseason have to change scheme because maybe it's not working and maybe you gotta look at it a different way and be like, this is how we're gonna do things to fix what is going wrong with this team.
So jumping into the other part of your question, just because we were talking about Calais Campbell, and we said he believes in Ritter. He said that he watched the tape. He said that Ritter made some really good throws, and that Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot made Calais Campbell a believer in Desmond Ritter and what he can do. And I think so too. Like, just what are we kind of thinking what we're going to do for Ritter going into this draft by creating, a better defense, by solidifying our offensive line, by adding more weapons, whether that be a running back, whether that be a tight end, whether that be a receiver. I think that's kind of the direction that we'll go with this offense. And as far as like the draft goes, I don't think we'll take a quarterback. I don't think it makes sense to trade up for a quarterback. If somebody falls, then maybe we would take them. But I don't even think that person's CJ Stroud. Like I've said this before, I don't think CJ Stroud is that much better than Desmond Ritter right now. I think that maybe if Bryce Young was there, it's a different story. Or maybe I could see our guys really liking Anthony Richardson for what he could become, right? The potential is there.
Mm-hmm.
But Anthony Richardson would have to sit behind Ritter anyways. Anthony Richardson
100%.
probably wouldn't be ready. So we would give it a year to see what Ritter can do. And then you bring Anthony Richardson along. And it can't hurt to have too many good quarterbacks. If you got two guys, you can turn around and then trade one of these guys if you think that, one of them's better or one of them wants a big contract or, maybe Richardson needs multiple years and then you have to kind of figure it out from there. But that's kind of what I see happening for this offseason.
Yeah, I've been in the camp of maybe the Falcons go for a quarterback on day 3. If you like a guy and think maybe he's a developmental guy. Yeah, so I've been on the camp of a quarterback maybe behind Ritter if you find a guy you like in the draft and he's there at day 3. I definitely love what Ritter brings with his mental game. He's got a much better mental game than some of these other quarterbacks. If you look at like the Marcus Mariota, who was our starter for most of last year, he's got a horrible mental game. You see, not to diss on him, but his mental game was horrible. When it came time to be like, okay, you're not starting anymore because you lost your opportunity, he flipped out and he didn't keep his cool and looked horribly mentally and in the media. So having a guy that's cool-headed, great leader, great work ethic for him. As you heard his first season, right when he came in, he was like one of the first guys to practice. So that gives me a lot of confidence in him. It's not the tape that shows up, it's the character of these guys who make me go, hey, this is the guy I want to lead Atlanta. And even if it doesn't work out, I think he could be a quality backup for someone if it doesn't work out. But for me right now, I think he's the guy, and you hand him the keys and say, hey, let's try to develop and let's make you the quarterback of the future, hopefully.
And we weren't, this isn't some sort of like some sort of scheme, right? Where we're just long play tricking everybody and that we're actually going to take a quarterback. Like, it's been going on for long enough. We're not telling, Calais Campbell and Taylor Heineke and all the other guys. Like, we're not saying, oh yeah, this is a trick, guys, so make sure you tell everybody that Desmond Ritter's our starting guy, right? Like, he's the guy. And if something wild happens and a quarterback falls to them, or if a quarterback's the best player on the board, positional value excluded, because our guys have shown that positional value almost doesn't matter. We're not taking a quarterback. Like you said, maybe a late round guy if the value's there, but
Surprised if the Falcons took a quarterback. But if they take a quarterback, that'd lead me to believe that there's something we're not seeing, and something that leads to them to believe that Ritter is not that franchise guy.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to the next one.
Next question, it comes in from Tyrone. He sent it to us via message, so it's not in audio format. So he said, since we cut Casey Hayward, is Gonzalez going to be the pick at 8 now? My answer to that is it's possible, but I wouldn't say I'm like 100% yes, he's going to be the pick. I think it definitely opens up the possibility a little bit more than it was a few days before he was released. But there's still a question mark of, do they still think they need cornerback, or do they think edge is more pressing and they like a guy enough to be like, hey, we like this guy enough to be like, we're going to pass on Gonzalez if he's there at 8.
And I think I kind of covered this a little bit in the beginning of this episode when we were talking about the release of Casey Hayward. I don't think it matters. Like, I think it is, and I don't mean this totally, but I think it's irrelevant whether Casey Hayward was there or not there, whether we cut him or keep him. I think that our guys are going to go best player available, and if they have Gonzalez as their best player available, then that's who they'll take. Will they? I don't know. Is Gonzalez even the number one corner on their board? He might not be. There's 4 or 5 really good cornerbacks, and a guy like Deonte Banks out of Maryland, I think, is like secretly flying up boards. I don't think he's better than Gonzalez, but I wouldn't be shocked to see, same thing. It depends on the scheme we run. Joey Porter Jr. is an amazing press man corner. And if we decide like we want to run a ton of press man, he might be higher on the board for the Falcons. Myself personally, Gonzalez is a top 5 player in this draft class for me. So I think that he would be the guy to take if he's there. I really think, like, for me, Nolan Smith and Gonzalez, if they're both there on the board, it's a really tough pick. Both of those guys are studs. But, we could go Witherspoon. Witherspoon's right now the most pro-ready corner, and he brings a lot of dog to the team. So
I totally agree with you. But I want to mention there are some second-round guys. So, and it's a loaded cornerback class. So if you wanted to be like, okay, we're going to take an edge because that's our biggest need on the team, which it is, they could do that and be like, okay, we're going to take edge, and then we're going to go a corner, say like a Keely Ringo or someone like that, who has the measurables, but hasn't been great all the time, has shown flashes of it, but needs to be more consistent.
I get worried about Keely Ringo. Like, he's so stiff. He's so stiff, and he's so stiff, and his agility is just not great. Like, his numbers weren't anything special. In fact, they were below average. I actually think Ringo would benefit a lot to move to safety.
He doesn't have those hips like Shakira, like you said for Gonzalez.
Yeah, he does not have hips like Shakira. Gonzalez, the fluidity of Gonzalez's hips for the size that he is absolutely ridiculous. It's just like, you don't see guys that big move like that, and that's why he's the number one guy for me, because I think his potential is just high, just skyrockets.
Yeah, he does only have 1 year of production though, whereas a guy like Keely has 2 years of college production. Though it might have been up and down for Keely at times. I I'm in some Georgia chats and I see stuff from Georgia fans, and I saw some Georgia people saying, "Oh, bench him. He sucks. He's the worst corner in the world."
Mm.
And people were like, "This guy stinks." Even though if you
Didn't-
watch and are looking closely at the game tape, you're like, this is a solid corner who has times where he makes mistakes,
Yeah.
and gets in
And
bad
I,
positions and gets beat, which happens with
and I
every
know
corner.
and I know you and I have talked about him in the past. I don't know if we've done it on air, but like for me, I said I talk about moving him to safety, but he also would be an amazing Seattle cover three corner. Like you don't have to do as much there. You're in man, you're in cover three. You're just kind of there. You don't have to, start and stop as much, right? You can just kind of
Mhm.
sit back, play the zone, use your size, your strength, your athletic abilities, and um, he could be a great corner, I think, in that scheme. But I don't think that's what we want to run. I think we're just talking about being multiple. Um,
And I do want to mention he ran like a 4.36. So
yeah,
if he's definitely got the athletic traits, maybe not the agility to be this
hmm
great corner,
he
but
has the straight line speed for sure.
he's got the straight line speed and he's got the size. But overall, if Falcons thought this is a guy we can develop, make better, maybe get him mentally up to where he can, instead of like being, even though he's a little stiffer, he could figure it out and get better technique.
And
It's
and
hard
that's
to
kind of
say.
why I talk about and that's kind of why I talk about moving to safety. Like he could be like a big, like a big slot corner, be a safety, cover tight ends who are not as shifty, and you don't have to worry about them being as explosive. So I don't know. There's a lot of things like he's a good athlete in some areas and horrible in others. And it's just about taking him and using his tools, like putting him in to use his tools appropriately. You don't want to
Yeah,
take a square peg and put it in a round hole.
for sure. Which I think there's plenty of other guys who are there who you can
Mhm.
take at corner. It's like that every draft. You have plenty of corners who show stuff. I'll mention a guy who is like a day 3 pick, Amir Speed, who's shown the
Mhm.
speed and the size, but hadn't shown it in college. He'd shown flashes at Georgia, some flashes
Mhm.
at Michigan State. But overall, if you like a guy and you think he's a top 5 prospect and he falls to 8, you take him.
Yeah,
That's
agreed.
my general opinion. But
But unless you have two, but here's the thing: is I legitimately could see a world where Nolan Smith, uh, Gonzalez, and Bijan Robinson, who a lot of people are saying are top 3 talent in this draft class, some say top 1, fall at 8. It's just gonna be interesting to see what happens. I
yeah,
don't think going back to Tyrone's question though, I don't think that I think we could take a corner. I don't think Casey Hayward impacts that much though.
I think it does make it slightly more likely in the fact that there's more playing time available, more playing time up for
Mm.
grabs. But I don't think it changes how the Falcons approach the draft.
Mhm. So the next question we got was from Cornell FSU 1454, again submitted the question via chat. He asked, "Will the Falcons draft a quarterback?" And I just wanted to throw that in there because I want everyone who submits a question. I want to like the first guys who submitted questions. I want to make sure we are able to talk about it, and we kind of went over that a little bit. I don't think we'll take a quarterback unless something crazy happens.
I don't think we take a quarterback unless it's like a day 3 guy we like.
Mhm.
That's my typical stance, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't take one. I'd say 50-50. That
Mhm.
one's kind of up in the air, but I don't think we take one first round if that's what he's asking. But
Yeah.
if he's asking full on draft, maybe.
So the next question, probably the final question, because we're starting to run out of time here. From JD Craig, what round would you target certain positions in this draft? I think that's a good question.
I
Do
think
you,
if you can, you go edge first 2 rounds and go receiver for 4th round, um, running back 5th round if you can.
well, we don't have any
Um,
5th round picks.
oh, that's right, we traded.
Yeah, yeah.
Then I'd go running back 4th round.
or the two
I'm so
fours. You
used to
go,
having the
yeah,
153, was it?
yeah, something like that. 153,
Yeah,
156.
I got so used to doing mock drafts with it. So running back third or fourth round, maybe another receiver, seventh round, corner, seventh round. Yeah,
Yeah,
and maybe an offensive lineman somewhere third or fourth round. That's how I do it.
mhm. I
But
think,
I don't know. It depends on who you are and who's on the board.
yeah, it's hard
But
to say.
that's how I'd like the board to shake out.
So I think, there's so many good edge players and there's so many good cornerbacks. Like, I think if you want one of the top edge guys, you need to go definitely in round 1 or 2, right? So you
Mhm.
need to target an edge there. If you wanted to, take a project guy or something, you could go in the later rounds. But, I think if you want a guy with elite talent and like elite potential right off the bat, you got to go picking him at 8 or picking him at 44. And then
Mhm.
corner is really deep, but same thing. The top guys, you're going to need to get them in round 1, but potentially you could get a corner that falls in round 2. Round 2 is so difficult because you just don't know what way the draft is going to go. Um, you guys listened to us talk with John Vogel yesterday, and he was talking about how he thinks that offensive line is going to go on a run in the end of the first round. And if that happens, then tons of corners, defensive linemen, wide receivers are all going to fall to us at 44. So you just got to go best player
Mhm.
available and just
100%.
and just see the way that the draft goes. And we've talked about corner, or we've talked about wide receiver before, and I always say, like, I really like taking a wide receiver in the 4th round because there's so many day 2 wide receivers that they're going to get pushed down. Like, you got A.T. Perry, Jonathan Mingo, Cedric Tillman, Reed, Tyler Tyler Scott, so many guys that I didn't even mention. Especially if there's a run on offensive tackles, and so the round 1 guys get pushed to round 2, the round 2 guys will get pushed down. So now you're sitting there, and it depends, right? Like, if there's a guy, like, let's say Jonathan Mingo's high on your board, and you're like, he's a 2nd round talent, then take him in the 3rd for sure. Or if you have him as a 1st round take him in the 2nd. But
Mhm.
I think, for me personally, these guys are all so close that I would wait until round 4 because I think one of those guys are going to fall. Now, that being said, if all of a sudden 10 wide receivers go in round 2 and you feel like, oh, we got to get one of these guys, grab them in round 3. But that's my thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. It definitely depends on how the board shakes out. Like what position, because there's always like a position that starts to go and it has like a bunch of consecutive picks that happen where that position is just being taken off the board. So if a run on a position starts to happen, when you get your next pick, you take the next available guy. That way you don't miss out.
Or you just say, or you, depending on how the board falls, right? Like if they're all gone, then you don't take the next tier down. You say, okay, we're not going to take, let's just say, I'm just going to use offensive linemen because that's what we've been using. And all of a sudden you're at 44, all the good offensive linemen are gone. You're not going to say, okay, well, we're going to reach on offensive linemen. All right, so let me go ahead and take the best receiver available because, there's only been one taken in the first 44 picks. Or, I don't know if that's going to happen. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's theoretical, but my ideal draft, and you guys will see this week, probably in my mock draft stuff, is Nolan Smith at 8, Keon White at 44, and I don't really care what happens after that. Truthfully, like if you give me those two, you give me those 2 guys, I'll be running around
Yeah.
like a crazy man.
I just want the Falcons to get like 2 wide receivers and hopefully like 2 edges in the draft. That's my
Yeah.
hope because I think this Falcons core, you have 3 capable wide receivers that I'm like, okay, I'm 100% good with those guys making the roster.
Mhm.
But I want them to add 2 capable young guys who you'll have for 4 years and will hopefully be able to contribute as maybe a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 at some point in their career, if not more.
And I like Kadero Hodge as a 4th receiver. Like he'd be better off served as a 5th receiver, but I'm totally fine with him as the 4th receiver. Again, I'm not going to ask him to do a whole lot. Like if we have somebody go down, I might be a little worried, but
Yeah, I definitely want them to grab a couple receivers just to improve that depth.
Mhm.
Because if Kadero Hodge is your fourth receiver, that's not great, but it's
Mhm.
not the worst you could have. It's
And like
definitely worse guys.
and like we've talked about too, I'll take, our receivers are all on 1 year deals besides Drake London. We don't have a single receiver on our roster right now for 2024.
Mhm.
So give me a young guy who can
Yeah.
hopefully do something.
And my hope would be that they draft a couple young guys that they can start beside him, maybe.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we'll end there because I don't think we have a ton of time left. But I want to thank you guys as always for joining us. I loved answering the questions. We'll definitely have to do this again after the draft. I look forward to hearing your guys' thoughts once the weekend rolls around and see where this team goes. I can't wait to welcome the new additions to the team.
100%. I love that. And I hope y'all have a good day. We'll hope to do this again sometime. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Falcon Strip. And go Falcons. Let's go.
Again, this is Thon Ray. You guys can follow us at Falcons_drip on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please make sure you subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do to get the alert for our next episode. If you guys enjoyed today, please leave us a review. It always helps us grow. Until then, see you next time. Rise up.